After that, then you get into the practicalities of it. Right, what's my business worth? A few bits on that side. So it boils down to,
what are the key questions that buyers ask?
We often get people who will spend 20 minutes explaining how they're absolutely unique in what they do, and then asking me if I've sold any businesses like theirs. I've had people ask me literally a week or two before their deal's due to complete, what about all the money in the bank? When do I get that?
This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. This week's episode is slightly different. Today, we get answers to all the key questions when it comes to selling your business, as well as some pointers for buyers too. Even if you're not ready to sell, this is an episode that's jam-packed, full of the knowledge that every business owner should have. Make sure you've got your pad and pen ready. Before we start, I have one simple request. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app that you're listening on. That's it. Thank you. Okay, so let's get into what is a really learning-filled episode. On today's Leeds Business Podcast, we have Mark Fitzgerald Cooke, MD of Intelligent Business Partners. And we've got a slightly different episode this week. So rather than going through Mark's career, Mark's going to teach us all about selling your business. But before we do, Mark, I assume you've come across lots of businesses that have taken equity in the past.
Certainly have, yep.
The reason I ask is because today's podcast is brought to you in association with Leeds-based YFM Equity Partners. YFM Equity Partners offer investments from £2 to £15 million, specifically to fast-growing businesses, as well as providing the resources and expertise needed to take your business to the next level. So if you're an entrepreneur with a vision for growth, whether you're expanding your market or scaling operations, YFM Equity Partners can help you turn your ambitions for your business into reality. Now, interestingly, one of the businesses YFM have already partnered with is Pan Intelligence, whose founder, Zandra Moore, was my guest on episode 23. So go back and have a listen to that. One of the things she actually did discuss in that episode was her experiences in finding YFM as their equity partner. So if you're looking to partner with a team that believes in your potential, you can find out more at yfmep.com. That address is also at the top of the show notes. And of course, when you do contact YFM, make sure you tell them that Phil from Leeds Business Podcast sent you, because it pays the lights and electricity bills. Thank you. So, Mark, we've got lots of people listening who maybe are thinking of selling their business, maybe haven't considered it yet, maybe it's in their plan. So let's start with a simple question. What are the key steps in selling your business?
The absolute number one step for selling your business is getting a timeline. So first thing, I want to sell my business. When do I want to sell it by? Okay, just get that clear in your head, because that will help you drive a lot of other decisions and things that you do next. So first things first is, when you want to sell it. And the reason I say that is people get confused between an exit date and an exit strategy. Yeah. So if you want to be out of your business in 3 years' time, you're probably a bit behind the curve now. You need to be thinking about it now, and that's a bit of confusion, mate. They forget about the bit that within that there has to be a business sale, and there needs to usually going to be a transition period. There'll be there's a lot that goes on. So when do you want to be out of your business? And then after that is getting really, really clear about why. Yeah, why you're selling, because it's a question that's going to come up. And so there's a couple of they're really practical ways of looking at it, because again, why you're selling is going to have an impact on a number of reasons. If without going off too far and down a wormhole, but if you're absolutely sick to death of what you do, then somebody coming in to buy your business who wants you to stay in the business for another 2 years is going to be a bit challenging, and there's a number of factors there. So they're kind of housekeeping, if you like. Why am I selling it, and when do I want to be out of the business by? After that, then you get into the practicalities of it. Right, what's my business worth? Yeah, so how do I find out about what my business is worth? What do I need to do to get the best price for my business? And then again, you speak to your broker, and we'll talk you through those processes. So quite simple though, is to, in the very, very first instance, is speak to somebody like ourselves, explain to us what your situation is, explain to us what you'd ideally like to happen, and then we'll give you the advice about what to do next, either we're the people to speak to now, or okay, we've done the valuation and actually what you're looking for and where you are means you should probably go and speak to these people instead because they'll help you grow the business. And it will enable you by having that initial conversation with somebody to then say, right, I understand what I need to do next. I understand the reality of my situation, and I'm better prepped now to make some informed decisions about how I move forward in selling my business.
Now, there's a couple of things you mentioned there, and I talk to people about this on a regular basis as well, is valuation. So people will come to you and go, Mark, how much is my business worth? And I always say to people, if somebody comes to you and knocks on the door and says, I'll buy your business for £1 million, you don't know whether that's a good price or a bad price. So just give us some tips on how we can find out not only the valuation of our business, but probably more importantly, understanding the different valuation metrics and different sectors have different ways of valuing businesses.
Yep, absolutely. Well, just on your first point there about different sectors, okay, but there's also different price brackets within those sectors. So it's just without jumping too far ahead. I had somebody look for a valuation on a care home, and it was a standalone care home that they had, and he'd done some research and seen that the care home sector was this multiple that he'd looked at, and I explained to him that the data you're looking at is to do with transactions of a value that are a completely different world and a completely different arena from the valuation of a single property in your location versus international, many hundreds of millions of turnover of business. So it's not just a sector; it's where you sit within that business, and that's a really common conversation that we have with people. Okay, so in terms of valuations, like the nature of what we do, it is not like getting a valuation for a 3-bedroom semi-detached house in your local town, where there are, there's millions of data points. Any 17-year-old trainee estate agent on the high street should be able to tell you what your 3-bed semi on that street's worth because they've sold loads of them. Okay, the very nature of businesses is that you've identified a gap in the market to some degree, and you've got a business because there's a market in that gap, and so there's a degree of uniqueness about what you do on some level. Okay, so and we often get people who will spend 20 minutes explaining how they're absolutely unique in what they do, and then asking me if I've sold any businesses like theirs. So what we will look at is if we're valuing a business, we'll get your last 3 years financials. We'll look at the performance. We'll give you a valuation range, which is based on an average of those 3 years and your last year's trading. So you've got 2 points. We'll provide you with a number of scenarios because buyers' circumstances are ultimately going to drive what the value of your business is. So we'll give you a little bit of logic behind the valuation range. We will normalize the accounts. So what does that mean? If there are any costs incurred in your accounts that will not be incurred by somebody owning your business in the future, then we will make adjustments for that. We'll add back. Now, if you get online, this is, you go on LinkedIn, there's people always screaming blue murder about this broker's valued a business in this way, and it's insane, and all the add backs they've done and everything else. There shouldn't be much getting added back, and there's a healthy dose of common sense in there. If you've got a business that spent 10 grand a year every year on entertaining clients, you can't go, well, we'll add that back because you've got a client base that expects it's going to get 10 grand spent on it each year, for entertainment. So we'll stick to stuff like, we'll look at depreciation. You look at directors' costs. You asked the question earlier on, is it, hands-off business or owner-operated or hands-off? If it's a true hands-off business, and by that we mean the business will run day-to-day, no problem at all without the current owner getting involved, then if that owner then has got a load of director-related costs in the accounts, you can make an adjustment for that. But if the director is up to their sleeves in running the business from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m, you can't take those directors' costs out or at least you can't take them all out because somebody has to do the work, when that person leaves. So there's a little bit of common sense in there as you make some adjustments, and that's because we can sell what we can evidence. There's no point doing a mad valuation because the buyer is going to come in and pull it together. But The other factor in valuations is it used to be that a business is worth what someone will pay for it, which is great when there's low interest rates and people are throwing cash around like it's going out of fashion. A business is now frequently worth what someone can get finance on, which is a very different scenario. Yeah, because they're going back to somebody's interested, they're going back to a lender and they're saying, right, this is the business I'm going to be, and I'm trying to raise some finance on it. Yeah, that has an impact. But broad strokes, if you went on and used intelligence-free valuation tool, you'd get 2.5 to 5 times valuation range of your net profit. And then it very clearly says on there, have a chat with us, because if you've got assets, if you're a rapid growth business, if you've got freehold or huge stock levels or other mitigating factors, long trading history has value. Yeah. So we'll then do a valuation that's built around that, but we will be explicit in what those scenarios are, give you a range, give you a price point, and that then enables somebody to go away and decide whether or not they want to work with us or someone else, or they agree or they disagree. But it's a starting point for a conversation about what they do next.
Okay. Now you mentioned a word there that people get their knickers in a twist about, is multiples, because it's we got a multiple of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, but the key obviously is what's it a multiple of. Now you mentioned net profit there, but people will obviously often talk about EBITDA, about EBIT, about annual recurring revenue. Is it usually just a straight net profit? Or do people do it on EBITDA and other weird and wonderful things, or turnover or client base or all sorts of things?
They all factor in. Yeah. So if you are selling a digital business, digital marketing business, okay, as a for example, and if you've got a number of bits there, if 90% of your work is building websites, yeah, and 10% of your work of your revenue comes from a little bit of SEO work and everything else, that that website building, unless you're doing maintenance, you've got other different bits and bobs off the back of it, that's very much a transactional relationship. If, however, then you subsequently have various contracts around hosting, or you're on a retainer where you're doing stuff for pay-per-click or SEO or something like that, so coming back to your recurring revenues, that's a very different scenario and a very different valuation. Yet you could have two businesses that are next door to each other in the same serviced offices, doing the same headline numbers and the same bottom line numbers, but with a very different mix in the client base, which is why I reference back saying, we actually need to have conversations with people. And that's why people get their knickers in the twist. You give broad strokes. You say, look, we look at your accounts, we look at your net profit, we'll make some normalized adjustments, and then we'll get into the scenarios, the client mix, the type of questions buyers are going to ask you about your business. Because if you are you're a large plumbing firm and all your work is done on it's pure B2C, you've got no contractual work, you've got nothing there that's securing future revenues, well, you're going to be in a different place from somebody that's got 10-year contracts with the local council. Yeah, that's going to be a very different mix. So people in the first instance want quite a simple idea of what what the valuation range might be, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it and give them a more detailed explanation. So people look for a short answer that they can pick holes in, but you have to give short answers because people don't want to listen to the whole spiel about it. So you have to kind of manage that process, saying there's the broad strokes, now let's get into the detail that will be relevant for you.
Okay. And I think you referenced it back at the start. I think you can find valuations in your marketplace in lots of different places, like Asking You or Trade Press or stuff like that. But you have to bear in mind what size of business that valuation was against compared to your size of business, et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, just going backwards, you said sort of key steps of selling your business is preparing your business for sale. Yeah. And I always compare it to selling your house. You wouldn't just go, right, come on, darling, we're selling the house, put it on the market tomorrow. You'd go around, you do a bit of decorating, you might change a carpet, you might, do up the garden, whatever it might be. So what are those preparation points you would do to tart up your house, tart up your business before you put it on the market?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, the preparation bit is, now we touched upon this quite a lot. So preparation, you need to have your numbers in order. So be easy to buy. Yeah, that's what you got to think. Every business is sellable if you think like a buyer. Okay, so if you, as the business owner who are selling, what would you want to know if you were buying a business as an expert in your space? So first of all, you want to understand what the financials look like. Okay, so there's the high level accounts, as I said, with the valuation. Okay, so we need to understand that. Within that, you'd need to understand, well, what's the mix of business coming in there? So very simply, you do your preparation, you've got the high level numbers, and then you want to understand, then you got simply people, products, and processes that kind of sit underneath that. So people will come in and say, okay, so you've got your people in the business. So are they on contracts? Are the contracts up to date? Are there, which will come out further down the line, if you've got any outstanding issues with any of those people and any of those contracts. You got your processes, are they documented? So are they, somebody comes in, picks up the keys tomorrow, can they easily understand what you do? And then understand about a little bit about the product mix, because what it is that your product or your service that you deliver and sell will represent future growth opportunities that will play a part in your factors. So just being pretty clear in your own mind about what those things look like, and easily being able to articulate that to somebody, along with a clear reason I said at the beginning about why you're selling and what sort of time frame you're looking at. So those are all early stage things. Get that preparation done. When you need to get a valuation, which you will need, those things I've just spoken about there will help give a better shape to the valuation and help understand what that looks like. And then you get into choosing a broker, getting the right partner to work with, and that's an important point as well, because depending on the type of business you have, we turn away as much business as we take on. And bluntly, if somebody comes to me and they've got 100 million turnover business a year and they're explaining what they want to do and they want to target a very niche audience in the mining industry, whatever, I'd say, guess what? I can put you in touch with somebody straight away who can help you with that, but it's not for us, So you do have to choose. To use your house example, there's a brilliant website called Get Agent, who years ago realized that it's not just about having my local estate agent, it's having a local estate agent who sells properties like mine. Yeah. So if you are a high street business, if you are on a trading estate, if you are on an industrial estate, if you've got a home e-com business and you're doing between 50 grand turnover and 15 million turnover, Intelligent can help you. Yeah. If you're a multinational corporation or whatever else, much smaller, the FT wants to know about your sale. That's not us, So as a broker, you've got to pick people that have sold businesses either like yours or structurally like yours in terms of the way they're set up, turnover, et cetera, because they are quite two distinct things. So you get yourself prepped, you understand your valuation, and you choose the right partner to help you sell your business.
Yeah. Just going back on the preparation. Interesting you say people, product, process. One of the things I think, particularly small businesses, is because they've grown organically, things like processes are not documented. We just do it.
Yeah.
And one of the things we fell foul of when we sold our business was not only processes, but also data collection and reporting. So we reported internally for things that benefited the business. When we went out to sell, or when we were being sold, the buyer was looking for reports and industry reporting structures and models that we hadn't done. So we had to go backwards and put things together. I think, from my experience, one of the things you need to do is understand what the market expects of you to report on, and also the processes get documented. So lots of things that you don't do as an SME, you almost should start doing even before you're selling, so that they are hardwired into the business to when you come to sell. And I think that's one of the things that people need to be aware of. And I do like your comment. Think like a buyer when you're selling, because that's great. So let's dig in. Let's dig into that. What are the key questions that buyers ask?
Yeah. Well, the first thing a buyer wants to know is why you're selling. As the phrase I always use is they want to know it's a planned exit. You're not running away, and they're not going to inherit a load of problems. Yep. So the simple ones are why you're selling. They want to know what the growth opportunities within the business are. They want to know what the biggest challenges faced in the business are. They want to know how things are documented in the business. Yeah. So if you take those four, why you're selling is a good overarching view of their circumstances. It will help indicate whether or not they're going to, the seller's prepared to work a transition period with you to help you mitigate any concerns you may have about processes and growth opportunities. The growth opportunities is interesting because the amount of people that will try and build growth opportunities into their valuation is unbelievable. And I always say to people, we can sell what we can evidence. It's hard for someone to pay for something you haven't done as the founder, because they'll say, well, if you've done it, then we might be prepared, even if you've only proved the concept, we might be able to pay a few extra quid for it. So something to think about. But those kind of basic questions that buyers are going to ask that a seller can easily prepare for. And just a quick point about the way things are documented. And that you're saying that is super important. There's a timing element of this as well. If you are, as many people are, selling your business confidentially, so if it's a confidential sale and you don't want your staff to know about it, suddenly going into Jenny in accounts and asking her to pull out every contract, or sort of in HR to pull out all the staff contracts for check-in, to start producing management accounts that they've never done before, on a monthly basis, et cetera, is going to raise a few eyebrows. So you do need to think about that process. And people will want to know management accounts monthly. They want to see how the business is trading this year to make sure it's on track. If the valuation is built around, 3 years of decent performance with a steady increase, well, is that still happening? Is it a bit of a bounce back after COVID, or is it sustainable? So all of these are factors. So there is a timing element of it, and then there's a confidential issue. There's lots of things people don't think about. But look, as I said, we understand that if you're running an SME day to day with all the things that involved with sitting down and making sure your HR is all in order is challenging. And of course, you might have contracts, but those contracts might be out of date. So, it's those four things have got a lot underneath them, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Interesting one. Just talk about sort of going to Jenny in HR and can you pull all this off? We had the situation where obviously we were an online business. And lots of businesses will have this, that individuals within the team have downloaded and purchased different types of software, and they've obviously set up their passwords and logins and all that sort of thing. And as the owner, you don't have those. So I was in this situation where, we had a team, there was a dozen of us in the team. So I had to say, I couldn't say to everybody, hey, can you give me all your logins and passwords? So I made up this story that I'd read a security article over the weekend about passwords and logins. So we set up a central database that everybody could put them in, so I could collect everybody's data. And it's things like keys and all the things that buyers want. They go, right, okay, how do I, who's got a set of keys for the office, and everything that goes beyond that, like passwords, like logins and stuff like that. You've mentioned it a couple of times, and I just want to dig into this. You've talked about transition periods. So, and I know we're jumping around on the process here. It doesn't work like, here's a bag of cash, here's the keys, see you, I'm off now. Just talk to us a little bit about transition periods and what a seller can expect to be asked to do.
Yeah, 100%. Look, one of the first things I'm doing on calls with people is exactly what you've just said there, Phil. There's no, James Bond supervillain suitcase full of tightly bundled up cash that people are going to take away. So everyone is looking to de-risk. Okay, that's the headline with this. Everybody wants to de-risk, and it's important for sellers to realise that it's not necessarily the buyer just being a pain in the backside. Often it will be related to how they're being funded and raising the financing, etc. Could, that we can pay you a portion now. The transition period is often linked to a deferred payment as well. Now, be that an earnout or be that guaranteed payment that's coming a little bit further down the line. So firstly, if you're the seller and there is a deferred element or certainly an earnout element to what you do that's like based around performance of the business, well, you probably want to be in the business whilst that's happening, because if your earnout's been triggered at £1 million of net profit, guess which business is going to do £995,000 worth of net profit? It's going to be your one. So you want to be inside the business for that. Now, there's different ways of what that transition period might look like. It could be that it's as simple as being at the end of a phone. It's that it might be that you're working 5 days, then 4 days, then 3 days, then 2 days over a period of time as people come on and they understand and, okay, we understand that this process is documented, but your expertise here would be really helpful. Whilst that's happening, you could be there could be a salary position, there could be different parts connected to that. So it really depends on the buyer's circumstances of how much of that transition is, what that transition is going to look like. And it also, there'll be an element of the deal structure in there that as the seller, how much you would want to be involved. So sometimes it's just coming in for a monthly meeting, it does vary. There's nothing hard and fast. Generally, you would expect, though, the commitment to be a little bit more intense at the beginning and then slowly phase out, depending on what's what. Increasingly, we're seeing deals where people are buying 80%, for example, of the business, and the seller's retaining a percentage. So they've got a vested interest in helping it grow, maybe with another exit. The buyer's retaining an option to purchase that X period of time down the road. So that can be very appealing for people as well. So the type of transition can vary. That there will be one is much more common than it used to be, and often that's driven by de-risking and finance and what the deal structure looks like.
Okay, and what sort of time period might a seller be looking at for this transition period?
Yeah, good question. Come back to buyer circumstance again. The less experienced they are, the longer they will want that person in the business. Typically, we've seen people putting deals together when they want the person tied in for another 3 years. Typically, 6 to 12 months is seen as reasonable. But again, it depends on what that earn-out looks like and the seller's circumstances on occasion. So we have a business at the moment where the guy absolutely loves what he does, loves it, but just doesn't want to be 1 minute negotiating contracts at a very high level and next being asked why they've run out of toilet rolls. He just literally wants to sit on a machine in the corner and do what he does, and be available to help. So he just doesn't want the day-to-day stuff, so he'll stay in that for a few years more than happily. Yeah. But typically speaking, it's if you take a year as a sort of a line in the sand, if you like, but again, depends on buyer and seller, what that actually looks like.
Right. Okay. A couple of my contacts have sold businesses, and through the transition / earn-out period, let's broadly say there have been issues, and some of them have incurred financial losses. So how can you, A, how regular is that, and B, how can a seller mitigate against that happening?
Yeah, it's a personal friend of mine went through this with a business that he founded in Australia, and it cost him 1.3 million Aussie dollars. And that's fairly recently. It's he got royally turned over by someone he thought he knew and trusted. But that's a slightly different scenario. In the UK, in our markets, what we see, warranties are a huge part of this. What does the legal agreement look like? What are the potential pitfalls and if you have scenario A, how does your contract cover you against that? Increasingly, we're seeing people requesting and getting denied personal guarantees to underwrite a lot of these issues for additional security. But certainly you look for warranties, certainly you look for personal guarantees. We're seeing clauses that if X deferred payment isn't met, then the company can revert back to the original owner or a similar type scenario. They're largely on a case by case study, but with 3 or 4 solutions that are applied. It really comes down to how those issues arise. So going back to my point about being easy to buy, when people come in and do the due diligence on a business, they will look in every cupboard for skeletons. And if they look in 9 cupboards and they're fine, and they get to the 10th one and they find something they're not happy with, they'll go back to cupboard 1 and they won't come out till they've got to Narnia. They'll be right in there. And people don't like surprises. They don't like trust being eroded. So, being upfront, laying your cards out if you're going to be working with someone after the sale is super important, because that relationship has to work. But it's often, it can be the challenging thing can be establishing the buyer's financial credentials. If how you do diligence on that side, because that is challenging. I'll show me a bank account with proof of funds. All right, well, I transfer money in, I transfer it back out again. So there's a few bits on that side. So it boils down to, Phil, having the right legal partner in place, experienced solicitors that have put deals together, on both sides. And without getting ahead of myself, one of the things I say to people all the time, if there's one bit of advice over everything, is have the right legal advice, because it might seem expensive until it isn't. And when it isn't is when you find out that they've closed loopholes and covered you about being exposed. And I say that again and again, get good legal advice to protect against that sort of thing.
Yeah. Just following on from that, from our business sale, our legal bill was was quite big, but we had some really technical stuff, and I'm begrudgingly say I'm sort of delighted that we had a big bill, because it was, and as a comparison, there's a business I'm invested in, and which has been on the market recently, and we haven't invested as much as we should have done on the legal side, and it's cost us a lot of money. So, just make sure, the guy who sold your house isn't the guy or the girl to be your lawyer for your business 100%. Sale. It has to be somebody 100%. who does this day in, day out. Absolutely. You mentioned it a couple of times. So, and it's the dull bit, it's the horrible bit, it's the bit that for our sale took 3.5 months after we sold the business in 2 weeks. Talk us through due diligence. What is it, and what should a seller be expecting?
Yeah, it's the really tedious bit. So first things first, due diligence does not exist to put the price up. Okay, the people come in doing due diligence and they are looking to find some loopholes and get the price down. So what should the seller expect? The first thing the seller should expect is that the relationship they've really enjoyed with their buyer to date is now going to take on a whole different perspective. It's, you've been through the dating, you've met, you've had dinner and everything else, and it's all going lovely. But this is a different world now. The buyer is making sure that after they have acquired the business, they do not find that they have bought a dud. Yep. So that'll be the first thing. So if they are, depending on the nature of your buyer, that's on the one hand, they're just looking to de-risk and to be secure and happy and satisfied that what the business does what it says on the tin. That's the one side. The other side of it is somebody who's coming in and they're going to look to rip it to absolute bits, and the numbers you've agreed in principle are suddenly going to look very, very, very different, and you could see some curveballs here that come out. So be prepared for it to be a little bit more bruising, and if it's not great, good luck. But so the way you can mitigate against that is to avoid surprises, have real clarity. So, again, what you're looking at, you need your financial house needs to be in order. Keep coming up. Keep saying this, but it's because guess what? It's ultimately it's about the numbers. Have your financial house in order. Super important. All your financials all make sense. Work with a good accountant. Work with a good tax advisor, certainly, because we often. Not so much now because we preach it earlier on, but I've had people ask me literally a week or two before their deal's due to complete, what about all the money in the bank? When do I get that? And it's like, right, let's go back to the business's money, not yours. So let's, but so will I be taxed? Now is not the time to ask that question, my friends. That should have been done a while ago. But so look at the financials. Get that understood. People are going to want to know underneath then the financials. They're going to want to know about your mix of clients. They'll want to see age creditors. They'll want to see age debtors. They'll want to know how many, if they haven't asked already, what your client split looks like. How much dependency have you got on an individual client? So you want to understand that about who your key client relationships are. What contracts do you have in place with those clients? Enormous amounts of organically grown businesses, literally meet at Christmas in the pub for a pint and we go again next year, so especially if they're longer established businesses. That's to my point earlier on about suddenly asking your clients for contracts when they've never had one in the past might make somebody raise eyebrows. But, if you're buying a business and there's no contracts in place, you quite reasonably are not going to be very happy with the idea that your workforce and your client base could all disappear off 2 weeks after you've purchased the business. And again, anti-compete agreements, etc., are all things that need to be built into the warranty. So if you're a seller who secretly thinks, well, I'm going to cash in here and then I'm going to take all my clients and start up down the road, well, guess what? Your buyers are going to be looking out for that as well. So it's around your financials, it's about your clients, it's about your contracts, it's about all the things you can evidence. People will want to know if there's any disputes with existing employees or anything that's on the horizon. So those sorts of things you need to come clean about as well during the due diligence process. As the seller, you make sure your solicitors understand where their clients, where the buyer's funds coming from. They'll be doing anti-money laundering checks and all of that type of stuff as well. You'd also want to understand what's the structure of the people buying the business. So often they'll say, well, look, this is us, we own these other businesses, but then they'll subsequently create another entity to acquire your business. So then you've got the question of, I don't want to get too granular here. It's like, well, hold on a minute. Yeah, we've got these warranties, but if I'm trying to get money off a business that hasn't got anything back in it and there's no personal guarantees, then actually all the words look all right in the contract, but underneath it, it's just words. There's nothing backing it up. That's why when I talk about good legal advice, being worth its weight in gold. And these are things that will respectfully, your mate down the pub who's a solicitor and help get you off your points and your driving points and your divorce is not going to help you in this circumstance, because again, with all respect to the profession, they don't put their hand up and go, actually, I know nothing about that, because that's not how professional people work. They have their areas of expertise. So I keep coming back to the bloody legal advice, but it's a truism. So you can have financial due diligence, you can have your legal due diligence, you can have your HR, your contractual. So all areas of your business, there'll be the client due diligence. It will be thorough. It will be thorough. So you need to be preparing for that in advance. And that's a particularly gloomy picture I painted there for anyone who's thinking about selling their business. But it is the reality. People are going to get under the bonnet and you're going to have your nose put out of joint, because you'll have a long list of things you should have done in the business. You just haven't got around to it because you're busy. We're all in those. We've all got that. Every business has that. And the buyers will find that out for you and they'll use that leverage to some degree.
Yeah. You will. From experience, I mean, usually it's basically it's a Dropbox, and you just put all your documents in your Dropbox. You will get sick and tired of looking at Excel spreadsheets. I swear. Now, something you mentioned there. All this money in my business bank. What happens to it when I sell my business? Talk us through that, because there's a lot of misinformation about that, isn't there?
Well, there is, and let's be crystal clear. I'm not about to add to that misinformation, Phil. All right, I'm going to say straight off the bat, I am not an accountant. I am not a tax advisor. Okay, so the first thing you do is when you look at that, you're thinking about this process, is you speak to your accountant, and if your accountant has not got sufficient tax knowledge, then make sure you speak to. I referenced the chap over at Assets earlier on, Simon Roberts. I'm on a panel with him next week. Simon's never met me, and I've name checked the guy a few times in different things recently. But those types of people will tell you exactly what the right thing to do. So is that your existing business then subsequently has a holding business? I believe you can transfer money in there. You can look at dividends. A lot of things people do is they will pile a load of money out into pensions. And if they've got, I think it's whatever 3 years or whatever the amount is, you can go back and backdate and move money out there. But get really good financial advice about the right way to structure that. You can sometimes build it into the business that, we normally talk about normal working capital being left in the business. You can have a conversation about what normal looks like and how that's built into the acquisition price of the business, etc. So there's a number of things there. The most important thing is timing. As I said earlier on, having that conversation 2 weeks before the money's about to land in, you're about to get paid, is not the right time. So from day one, and there's a number of bits around this that we do as soon as we take a business on board these days, not when they've had an offer. As soon as they come on board, we give them a checklist of these are the things you need to look at. These are the contracts and the things and the financial questions you need to ask. And we will steer them in the direction of people that we know and trust, who will give you 10, 15 minutes of information about things you need to think about so you can be prepared plenty of times in advance. So, but to be clear there, Phil, I mean, no way I'm looking to be evasive on that question, but it is such a serious subject that, I can tell you what not to do, which is delay. And what you should do is go and speak to a professional that actually does it day in, day out, and will give you advice based on your personal circumstances, which of course is another factor. So for example, if you've exited another business and you've got your, it used to be called entrepreneur's relief, but if you've used up your limit of tax relief on a previous transaction, then obviously you've got a different scenario now. So that's why you need to go in there and speak to experts. And obviously people are a bit nervous about any upcoming changes there might be to that as well. So speak to your accountant in the first instance, and he should point you in the right direction, or otherwise ring Intelligent and we'll give you a couple of people you can go and speak to.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, when we sold, we had a sort of pile of cash in the bank, and the way we took it out was it was added to the value of the business, and we used our entrepreneur's relief on that. Some people will say, take it out as dividends, and take it out that way. It may or may not be the right way to do it, depending on tax. And you've referenced it as well. How much is working capital? And just, in a simple calculation, the buyer is going to say, I need X amount of pounds to keep this business running for the next 3 months, just for paying salary, suppliers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've got one last question before we'll flip the last question onto the other side of it, which is the buying side. But before we do, I want to talk to all our listeners and viewers about the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal has two sides to it. My side of the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal is I bring you interesting, fascinating, and educational this week guests for free, like Mark. You, listener and viewer, have two sides to your side of the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. Number one, recommend this podcast to one other person you feel will get a benefit from it. And part number two, and I really need you to do this because nobody's done this for a while, write us a review on the Apple Podcast app or at podchaser.com. There you go. That's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. Fair deal, Mark?
100%. I'm in.
He's in. Mark's in. Okay, so let's flip the coin. Let's say we are buying a business.
Yes.
Okay, so we've decided either we want to become an entrepreneur and we're going to buy one, or we have an existing business and we're going to tag one onto it. What are the common mistakes buyers make?
It depends what level you're at in terms of where the market, what part of the market you're in, which will depend on that. The common ones are you really need to think about, like selling. It's about why, like why are you buying the business? Yeah, what your expectations out of buying this business? Because you get people to do it with their head, you get people to do it with their heart. Yeah, so common reason, certainly with smaller businesses, is that we saw it when during COVID, you could not move for people that wanted to buy tea rooms and coffee shops in places like the Norfolk Broads, the Lakes, Devon, Cornwall, and everything else. Went mad. Everyone was selling up, moving out of London, going to buy those businesses. That's great. If I'm selling you the business, I'm going to be asking you as a buyer what experience you've got in that market. I'm going to be asking you where your funding's coming from. Yeah. If you haven't got experience, what transferable skills, what has attracted you about this business? If you own other businesses, where are the ones that you own? Because with all due respect, if you've got a cafe in Newcastle and you're inquiring about one in South London, I'm not having it that those are going to be run together as part of a roll-up strategy. So it's not going to work. So we're going to have questions that you're going to have to answer about that. What's the logic? What's the fit? And all we're looking to do there, Phil, is a couple of things: is to weed out people that are serious about buying a business and the ones that are just a bit aspirational. Yeah. And there's, people come in, they've had a crappy week at work and they've had enough, and it's, I'm going to go and buy a business and be my own boss. It sounds brilliant until you are your own boss. And there's people like you who've been your own boss will tell you it is not quite as advertised a lot of the time. So on behalf of our clients with buyers, we'll be trying to cut through that noise and make sure that they are, we're looking for a buyer to demonstrate they're competent and credible. Yeah. And that's a hard conversation to have with yourself, that I'm competent to run the business, after I've bought the thing. And in terms of credibility, am I going to get funding to buy it, to move it on? to be able to acquire the business. So but in terms of like real common mistakes that we see from people buying businesses, is their head rules their heart, so they don't get the right legal advice that we said earlier on. They don't do sufficient due diligence because they're just dead giddy about getting into the business, or it's a great fit in their roll up, or they're overconfident that they can fix these issues in the business. Not planning properly. It's like, it's one thing if you're like talking about acquiring it, like the roll up thing, fitting it with your business. It's like, okay, well, if you're buying a business that's got a load of products and services that you don't currently offer and would dovetail in with your existing client base, and your stuff goes into theirs, that makes sense in principle, as long as the contracts and everything else. Yeah, you get that. It makes sense if that you've got clients you're in Yorkshire doing great, and this business is doing great over in Lancashire. So, it's better to acquire than to try and build it from scratch. All of those things make sense. Well, that's great. That's good planning. Geographically being a poor fit, or the products and services not quite aligned, or you can't cross over, you can't centralize some of your costings, which is much harder than people think it is. That's poor planning. And that kind of then comes into a little bit of overstretching, which is the other one as well. So you'll often see people that they've got on a roll and I've got this. There's a huge amount of integration work to be done, even in relatively small businesses. So the other one I'd say be wary of is overstretching. And the other one is just simply buying the wrong business. Again, we saw this is more common when people are buying a business for their own for the first time. But if you've spent your life at the back end working in IT, never actually having any conversations with consumers, and you don't really like people, well, guess what? Don't buy a tea room in a busy tourist area where you've got people stomping through the door demanding to know why their doilies aren't the right shape. You've got to think about that as well. Are you a good fit for what you're doing? So, poor legal, not doing the right due diligence, not planning, overstretching, and basically acquiring the wrong business. And, that could be many, many things.
Right. So there's lots of listeners now going, ooh, I best not do that. And I think one of the key things you said there is this whole thing about synergies. Oh, we've got 2 bank accounts, 2 accounts departments, 2 sales departments. We can merge the 2. We'll take half of them out. That's 50% profit straight on the bottom line. Be dead easy. It works in books. It doesn't work in business.
Absolutely. On LinkedIn. There's one guy on LinkedIn who is quite good on that, and I can't remember his name for the life of me now, but he often posts. He's done a lot of stuff, a lot of growth, and he's really transparent about, what, this worked really well, this is a complete fantasy, and it's useful. Do that kind of research, but it's hard, if you really, let's say, if your heart's really driving it, and sometimes that might be enough to carry you through, but do yourself a favor. Especially if you've been smart and savvy enough to build a business or have a career or something that's got you to a point now where you're in a position to do this, don't throw out all that common sense when it comes to, buying a business. You wouldn't do it with that. You wouldn't buy a house and just ignore the surveys. You would go, yeah, I know it's on the edge of a cliff in Norfolk, but I don't care. I like the view. Well, you'll be in the view in 5 weeks. So just use that common sense. It's really, really important. And it works with people also telling me, on the valuation side, someone told me my business is worth £1 million. Okay, well, go sell it with them then, because I tell you now, no bank is going to lend on that, and no one's paying more for cash, so the numbers don't support it. So, it's just keeping that commercial nous that's got you to this point. Don't throw it away because you get too excited about something.
Okay. And if after this, 50 minutes, we haven't put people off either selling their businesses or buying a business, where can they get a hold of you?
Right. So I am at all the W's .intelligent.co.uk, mark.fc at intelligent, ENT on the end, intelligent.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm the only Mark Fitzgerald Cooke on LinkedIn, so I can be found on there as well. And get in touch. I'm always happy to either help people out or point them in the right direction. I know I do sound like the angel of death with these things sometimes, but it is much, much better to have a candid conversation right at the beginning than have paid out for solicitors, paid us, paid whatever third party, and then find out afterwards. You go, oh, I wish I'd known that at the beginning, And it's not the easiest process in the world. Yeah, but it's doable. We're putting buyers and sellers together every single day, but our name is Intelligent Business Partners. And like any good partner, we'll tell you the stuff you need to hear, not always what you want to hear, perhaps.
Mark, it has been absolutely brilliant. So much learning. I hope our listeners and viewers have taken some really good lessons from that. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, you're more than welcome, Phil, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and your audience. Really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you found it interesting, inspiring, and of use. To make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, please subscribe to the show. Go on, do it now. Do it now before you go off and do something else. Thank you. Much appreciated. Oh, and don't forget our fair deal. See you next week.